Hi, my name is Paul. This is in response to Kara Sutra's video where she talks about parents. Hi Kara, I want to tell you something. I think your video was spot on right, and I think you've been damn straight on the whole thing. So let me tell you something. For the 5% of your viewers who are parents, who are upset that you are providing sexual information, possibly for teenagers, yeah, so they make up accounts. So what? Here's the thing. Here is, in general, a picture of what they look like. As you can see, they're not looking at your video. In fact, you can guess why I'm saying it, because that's the attitude they have. These are the type of people who probably fought to keep sexual education out of the public schools. Well, you know what? 5,000 years of history tells us that abstinence training doesn't work. Honesty and reality is the right answer. I nearly swallowed my tongue once. I was so shocked to find out that nowadays kids as young as 11 are having sex. And if we don't talk to them about it and let them know what's wrong, they're not going to not have sex. They won't know any better. They're going to do exactly what you said. They're going to have unprotected sex. They're going to get in trouble. They're going to get knocked up. Anyway, for example, okay, when you have good and correct information and you give it in the right way, you can actually make things better for people. I used to give answers on Yahoo Answers. I got kicked off because I was too forthright. Somebody flagged me, didn't like my answers. I eventually got banned from the service for being too obvious or too open. So I know exactly how you feel. But anyway, one of the questions that came up was that a young lady, probably under 18, but that's not an issue, was mentioning that she was planning to have sex with her boyfriend, that both of them were virgins, that she is on the pill, that she would have him use a condom, and she wanted some advice about it, okay? And she was mainly concerned about what to do as far as making sure that he didn't cheat on her if she did go this far. I pointed out something to her, and this is the whole point I'm making, is that when you do this correctly, when you give honest and true answers, you have a better chance of influencing people's conduct. The fact that she's asking indicates she's already halfway there. As you pointed out, telling her not to do it or lying to her about it is probably going to make her more likely to try it anyway. So I thought, let's figure a way to make this better for both of them and to solve her problem. And I gave her an example. Since she's already on birth control, you've eliminated one half of the real reason to need condoms. Now you can use the second method. In fact, it's a good idea to do so, because when you use one form of birth control, there's about a 3% chance of failure. If you use two forms of birth control simultaneously, the chance of failure drops from 3 in 100 to 9 in 10,000. So she could use something else that's also a non-invasive form, such as film, in addition to taking the pill. And the reason was I gave her this answer. She's in a special circumstance. If she is in fact still a virgin and she knows her boyfriend, future boyfriend is, or whatever you want to call him, then what she can do is that she can offer him a special privilege. She can allow him to have sex with her without using a condom. Since she's already using birth control and they both know she is, she could conceivably use another one like foam or film in addition to the pill. She has a rare and special opportunity to do something you can't normally do under other circumstances. She has the capacity to allow him to have sex with her bare, because she's already using contraception. Now, what she can do is to make a deal with him. Okay, he can have sex with her anytime he wants. He gets to have it with her bare, but he can't have sex with anybody else. Now what this means is that he gets the advantage that he doesn't have to bother with a condom with somebody else. He gets it anytime he wants, and he gets a much better experience. And she's protected against him possibly catching a disease. He can't get these features from anybody else, And be certain that he's not taking a risk either. He's got a reason not to stray. Let me tell you something else. This is something I've discovered from my own research. There is, for lack of a better term, I'll call it a pendulum. The mores in society, and this has gone back for several thousand years, swing. They swing from loose to tight. When you have loose times, women are less likely to demand marriage. They're more likely to engage in free and open sex, and it is much easier for guys to get laid. In less open times, women are more likely to get married, and they are less likely to engage in open sex or free love. And this has been going on a 20-year basis, where it goes from open to closed to open to closed, going back hundreds of years. One of the reports I remember reading in a newspaper article told how during the 16th century, the 1700s and so on, during the founding of the United States, couples would be told once the female got pregnant, they would be strongly recommended that they get married, so that the child that the woman had conceived would not be charged to the town as a bastard, as opposed to the new couple taking care of it. It was common enough back then that it was written into the public records about this sort of thing happening. So this has been going back hundreds, if not thousands of years. You can look at the 20th century. During the early part of the 20th century, roughly around the start of the Depression, the 1930s, things were pretty much open for two very important reasons. One, the morals had changed, and two, if you lived in a place, your landlord, who was deathly afraid he wasn't going to get his rent, was more interested in his rent than in your morals, and was more likely to turn a blind eye if a guy or a girl had someone of the opposite sex up to their room for that reason. During the 1940s and 1950s, this became less obvious. During the 1950s, we know it was a fairly conservative period. And of course, everybody knows about the 1960s. Well, that period lasted from about 62 to 82, where things were pretty open. From 1982 until fairly recently, things were a lot less open. Even though they were pretty open, it was a lot less open than it was during the 60s. Of course, the venereal disease problems. We're starting into, and you've noticed it yourself, a more open period where it's a lot easier for people to get casual sex. And parents who don't recognize this, especially the ones who are around in the 60s and did exactly all the same things that they now criticize their kids about, are doing exactly what the example parents I showed at the start of this video are doing. If I had a daughter, I've never been married, I've never had kids. If I had a daughter who was 13 or 14, personally I'd rather she not have sex. But if I have to make the choice between her knowing enough to know when to use contraception, and especially use it properly, versus her not knowing and going ahead and doing it anyway, I'd rather her using contraception and not getting pregnant and not getting a social disease that might kill her. It's a lot worse now. Parents are forgetting. In the 60s, you got a social disease, you took penicillin. You could get away with it. Now we have incurable and often fatal social diseases. Gonorrhea and syphilis were fatal up until fairly recently. They've become not so much. Now we have new either permanent or permanent fatal diseases around, which if we don't watch out for, we can be in trouble. It is no service to a young person to leave them ignorant so they catch a fatal disease, because you're not going to stop them. They just figure you're scaring them. And besides, most of the people saying this stuff did this stuff themselves, and they look like hypocrites. They're saying, don't do this, even though I did it anyway, and they look like a hypocrite for being that way. Yeah, we can tell them times were different. but we're still going to look like hypocrites for telling them, yeah, we did it, but you shouldn't. The simple answer is to tell them, this is what the risks are. You can protect yourself, and maybe you don't want to do this until you're really sure you're ready to be doing this sort of thing. As you pointed out in one of your videos as an example, if you don't feel comfortable with talking with the person you're going to be with about contraception, you got no business having sex with them. Anyway, my name is Paul. That's been my opinion. Thank you for watching. Email Paul at paul-robinson.us.